services team, can I just let you all know that we're about to live stream, and it's just to make you aware that we will be, members of the public will be able to see the meeting. Okay.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you for that. Super. We'll just give it a couple more minutes. Well, we're not quite on 4 yet, are we? So let's maybe give it to a minute or so after 4 before we kick things off. So Mel, I was just explaining that that I'd been on a very long but invigorating Zoom call around solutions to the planet, and I know there's at least one other person on this call who's on the same one. So
yes,
it was amazing, wasn't it?
It was incredible. Although it's definitely, as invigorating as it was, Simon, it's definitely a long day for being on Zoom today.
I know, it really is. It really is. 11 and a half hours of Zoom. I think there might actually be some sort of clause in the Geneva Convention about that. If not, we probably need to draft one. Andrew, hi. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Everybody trapped in Zoom land.
Yeah, but for good reasons today. Good, lots of Zoom, but good Zoom. So that's it.
Yeah.
Hi, Mark.
Celebrity Squares has gone downhill, hasn't it? Yes.
Yes, it has rather.
Hi there, Simon. Hi, everyone.
Hello there. So just for new arrivals, we are live at the moment. So we're live on the YouTube streaming channel, so that so this is now in the public domain. Scott, hi, nice to see you. And Noel has joined us too, which is great. I think we're almost there, aren't we?
Hi Simon, it's Jim here. I think you can see me.
Hello, Jim. Yes, oh, there you are. Hello. Yes, yeah. I've got you now. Yeah, hi.
See you.
You too, absolutely. So,
sorry, Chair, it's Sarah again. We're just waiting for confirmation that it is actually live streamed.
Sarah, say that again. I couldn't quite hear you properly, Sarah. Could you say that again, please?
I can. Sorry, Councillor Pringle. Sorry. We're just waiting for confirmation on whether it's being live streamed. We have been, as Jeanette's advised everybody, we've been having some technical issues streaming to YouTube, and I'm just waiting for my colleague to confirm that we are streaming to YouTube.
Okay.
Bear with me a couple of minutes.
Let's just wait for that confirmation. That's absolutely fine. Absolutely fine.
Okay, so we've got confirmation that we are live streaming, so it's okay to start the meeting.
All right, great. Thanks, Sam. Super. Well, welcome everybody. So what we are really going to do, I think, is treat this as we have been treating all of our virtual meetings. Oh, there's some others joining us now. Richard, hi. Alan, good to have you with us as well. So it is a formal meeting. We are streaming it live via essentially the YouTube channel that the Combined Authority manages. I don't think I really need to do much in terms of meeting etiquette, given how used to Teams and Zoom calls we all are. But I think for the purposes of this, if we can keep cameras on during it, it'll be helpful. There are some meetings I think we tend to switch off, which is fine. But for this one, we've got a fairly sort of tight agenda, and it would be quite helpful, I think, for those who are presenting to have people to present to. So if it's okay, keep your cameras on. Clearly, if you need to switch off and drop out briefly for whatever reason, then we're all adults. We can do exactly that.
Join the meeting.
In terms of questions and interventions, we're going to do exactly what we did last time, which is we'll use the chat function. Both I and Jackie will be keeping our eye on that. So if you've got questions that that occur to you during the presentation that somebody is making, then use the chat function if you can. During open discussions, post the presentations, just show a hand either physically on screen or use the show a hand function, which you will find on the reactions button, which I'm sure you're very aware. In terms of apologies, we have had a late apology from our colleague Rosa Foster, who's in the middle of an emergency sort of response situation due to the fire in Bradford. So she has posted late apologies. I'm not aware of any others, but I'm going to go to Sarah just to double check on that. Can you help me if there are any other apologies, please, Sarah?
No, I haven't. It's Jeanette. I've not received any further apologies.
Okay, thanks, Jeanette. That's great. Okay, so in terms of the minutes, I'm just going to quickly sort of drop onto a number of the key items and then come back to you as a group to check whether you're content with those minutes and whether there are any sort of variations on them. So key items, item 5, that is going to return to the GEP next year, which is the White Rose Forest. We had anticipated inviting White Rose Forest back for this session, but there's not been enough progress made, so no criticism implied, just the traction's not there for us to share, so we're going to bring that back next year. The Green Infrastructure Standard Trial, there's a full update of that embedded within item 7, I think, Jackie, is that right? I think it's item 7. Yep. And then on number 7, the emissions reduction pathway. That is that's one of the major items for discussion on this meeting, covered in item 5. And the GP recommendation was approved by the combined authority in July 2020 for the work to proceed to tasks 2 and 3. So that's really good news. So the work that colleagues have done and the input that we have given has been approved and it's moving forwards. So clearly still lots to be done, but good news, we'll hear more about that later on. Can I just then pause briefly and just check for affirmation, questions, comments in terms of the minutes? Otherwise we'll just move on and I'll give you a brief update onto some of the matters that I've been involved in. So I'm going to take that everybody's happy. So that's great. So on the one of the actions last time round was for me on behalf of this panel to engage more broadly with leaders and other sort of senior panel members in terms of the climate emergency. So I did that. I prepared a presentation on the 26th of August and shared that with a wide group. It was really quite successful, I think. There was a lot of interaction during the session and lots of follow-up action. There's also been a number of sort of one-to-one or small group sessions that have resulted from that Jackie, Noel, Alan, I imagine, and others have actually engaged in. I think we had more than 50 people during that event, and from my perspective at least, it went reasonably well. I mean, I know Mark was on that, Jackie was on that, there were a few others as well, but it certainly did seem to create some traction. So, yep. Oh, thank you, Mark. Thumbs up there. So
no, it was excellent, Simon, for sort of someone like myself who is a passionate follower of this topic, but doesn't have the level of detail and knowledge that you do. It was incredibly helpful to share that and to have the conversation widely. So thank you very much.
That's really kind. So I just wanted to make sure that people were aware that we, that sentiment that was very prominent at the last meeting that we had, which was to make sure we broaden this agenda out and engage others and bring those with us, particularly those that have got political authority. We've done that now. It's not a one-shot thing, clearly, but the pump has been primed and we can continue to build from it. So second one is there's been a lot of change recently in terms of resourcing and panel membership and so on. So I need to share a number of things with you. Many of them are going to be, well known to you already. The first one, which is the biggest and most sort of challenging one, I would suggest we restrict our comments to the end of the session once we stop live streaming in terms of any feedback or comments that people want to share. But Jackie is leaving us for really positive reasons. She's going back down to Devon to be closer to her family. And she's taking up a role in, I keep calling it Torquay, not Torbay. It's Torbay, isn't it, Jackie? So, but she's taking up a role in Torbay. And I know that it is something that's been a really hard decision for her, but it's, so it's not walking away from a role that she loves and, right in the middle of a whole bunch of positive momentum that she's generated with us, really, frankly, she's generated. But she is going down to Devon and to take a new role. And I would just like to put on the minutes how thankful and grateful I am. I'm sure the rest of us are for the contribution and the support and the insights and the leadership and the the collegiate working that she actually brought to bear. So we will miss you greatly, Jackie. I'm not going to embarrass you by asking you to comment, and I'm not going to embarrass you by asking others to comment to you until we come off live streaming at the end of this. But thank you and good luck, and we will stay in touch with you. The other positive news, because it is a positive thing, so it's definitely positive for Jackie, so it's a positive thing. It's not great for us because we're losing a fantastic colleague, but it's positive for Jackie, is that we are recruiting the technical hub is seeking to recruit a new colleague to support the hub, provide technical support and develop a pipeline of robust projects for future hub funding and so on. So that is out there now under recruitment. And we also have some panel member changes, which is again something that I'm going to have to thank people for their contributions and ask it to be added to the minutes. Alice, thank you so much for everything that you've done over the years. I mean, it's just been amazing. I know you're not going in an immediate sense. You're tapering it down. You're going to continue to engage with the Green Economy panel, but you are taking on, I think, the vice chair of Bradford's new Sustainable Development Board, Sustainable Development Board. So that's a fantastic role. And we're really excited to hear how that goes and watch your sort of new engagement with interest. But we will truly miss you once your departure is full. But you're going to be tapering that down. Conspicuous by his absence is our friend Wallace Sampson, and due to the boundary changes, Wallace has decided the best thing for him to do is to stand down from the panel. And his commitment to the panel over the years has been absolutely tremendous. He's been a really superb advocate for all the work that we have done. He's led the development of some of the region's, I think, most innovative green initiatives. Certainly, he's been the standard bearer for them. Most notably, I'd guess, the Energy Accelerator, and he's also been a really sage provider of advice and moderation to some of the discussions and debates that we've had. So we already miss Wallace, and I'd like that one to be minuted too. So in your absence, Wallace, if you are actually looking at this on YouTube, which I suspect you're probably not, but even if you are, thank you very much indeed. And on a congratulatory note, we won. Now, what is the MJ, what's it stand for?
Municipal Journal.
Municipal Journal, yes. So the Combined Authority and the LEP won the Achievement Award for Leadership in Tackling the Climate Emergency, which is an amazing achievement, actually, given everything else that's going on around the country. And it's a real reflection on the officers that are supporting this approach, and of course all of you who are giving of your time freely and enthusiastically. So well done, fantastic. It's a combined effort, and I think it's something we can be really proud of, but not complacent about, because we know there's heaps to do yet. But well done. It's we're getting noticed, and it's very nice to have those little bits of recognition from time to time. So, gosh, with all of that over, I am going to go to the first material item, unless anybody has any comments or questions in the short term. Let's quickly check the chat there. I'm assuming not. We will keep the call open after we've stopped the live streaming at the end, if anybody wants to have a chat with Jackie or Alice or others. But for the time being, we are going to go to item 5, which is the carbon emissions reduction pathways, which is our first major material item. And Noel, I know that you are going to be taking us through this. It's a really important piece of work. So over to you, and we're going to leave plenty of time for discussion at the end.
Thank you, Simon. Good afternoon, everybody. So I will endeavour to share my screen with you so you have the presentation. So just bear with me ever so slightly while I do that. Can everybody see that now?
There it is. Yep, that's great.
It is lovely. Technology is it's on my side this afternoon, thank goodness. So today what I wanted to do was really just give you a little bit of an update on the carbon emissions pathway work. Obviously, last meeting we presented the outputs of the first task of that work. But since then, we've sort of been busy beavering away on sort of tasks 2 and 3. I'll tell you what those are just as a reminder in the next slide. But also, I'm going to give you a bit of a flavour of what that's saying. But more importantly, really, this session's really going to be about the engagement that we're planning to do on this work and trying to get some of the panel's input into that and trying to shape and get you enthused about how we can help and shape that process. So, as a recap, very, very quickly, because I'm sure you're all very, very familiar with this, quick why we've commissioned the study. So obviously you're all very much aware of us declaring a climate emergency last summer and taking that opportunity to strengthen our regional emissions reduction target to be net zero carbon by 2038 and to have demonstrated significant progress by 2030. So the study that we did, the carbon emissions reduction pathways, it answers the what, the why, the when, the who, and how will we get towards that target. But what it doesn't do, it doesn't say the spatial dimension, it doesn't tell us where. The work is broken down into 3 tasks. So the pathways that you heard about last time, the different ways in which we get to that 2038. And then task 2 is around our roadmap, it's basically telling us about when we should deploy different measures, but also the decision points that lead up to the deployment of different measures. And then task 3 is really around the policy recommendations and the actions that need to be put in place to allow those measures to become a reality. So just to recap, you heard this last time, but just to make sure everybody's sort of very aware of the messaging that's coming out of this. West Yorkshire could meet its target. That's the headline side of things. And we do that in 2 ways. We do that by delivering the entirety of the emissions savings that were identified in the carbon emissions reduction pathways. So depending on which pathway you look at, there's 3 of them, you get anywhere between 73 and 82% of the way towards where we need to go. How do we plug that gap? Well, we do it in 2 ways. We increase our ambition in certain areas. So some really good examples of that around additional tree planting or additional levels of sort of home working, which we've seen as a result of the pandemic, being quite conservative with some of our estimates in the modelling on that side of things. Or we look to innovative technologies that inevitably will come about over the next 18 years to help us get to where we need to be. We don't have all the answers at this point in time. The pathways really give us that opportunity to start on a pathway to net zero. There are common actions across all of this, across all of the different pathways, which we can focus on and really make a drive towards getting towards net zero in the next sort of 5 years. It doesn't matter what pathway we'd look at in that respect. That being said, government do need to make some decisions and provide some support to us so we can fully achieve that target. Without that support, we'll struggle to get there. Anywhere in the country, we'll struggle to get there, quite frankly. We do need to be ambitious, both from a leadership perspective and with our policy positions. So this is something that we need to take on board, and the outputs of sort of tasks 2 and task 3 of this work will really help to try and guide and steer how ambitious we can be in the types of policy that need to be implemented. So coming on to this session, so I'm going to look at it in 2 ways. One is really around the engagement side of things and what we're doing from now until sort of February time and then beyond. And then the second part will just give you a little bit of a flavour of the outputs of tasks 2 and 3. So first thing to say, really, we've only very, very recently received the outputs of the work. So they are very much draft, and we do absolutely need to have those conversations with our stakeholders about the shape of them, how palatable they are, how politically acceptable they are before, we really move through to that approval and endorsement stages. What we're doing today, we sort of want to try and seek initial thoughts, particularly on the engagement side of things from the panel. Obviously, we only have a finite amount of time today, so there is an absolute offer if anybody is really, really interested to dig into the detail, to have additional sessions with panel members or as a group. Ultimately, we'd like to bring something back to this panel that really digs into the detail on what those tasks 2 and 3 are telling us in December, but more likely probably in January now, to really get into the meaty discussions around some of the things that are coming out of that work. So if we move straight on to sort of the public consultation and what we're trying to achieve here. So it's really, sort of 4 key areas in which we want to sort of really focus our attention when it comes to the public consultation. And really, it's about, first and foremost, raising awareness with the general public, West Yorkshire residents and its businesses about what this actually means for them as individuals, as communities, or as businesses, really. What does 2038 net zero carbon mean for them? What does it look like? So trying to bring it to life. It's something that we're asked all the time is, what does this mean for the man in the street? So that's really what we're trying to do on the one hand with that side of things. We also want to sort of test appetite for the different things that we need to put in place to meet our target. It's about developing this mandate around the things that we need to do, getting some real buy-in from people for what needs to happen. Moving on from that, really, it's about informing our priorities as well, what we focus on in the short term, the next 5 years, to tackle that climate emergency. And then the final part of that public consultation really is calling on the government to deliver the changes that help us reach our targets. So this, across all of the sectors, there are some lobbying asks that are included within that. Within this, reaching different audiences is going to be absolutely key to making sure that we do get that mandate for the work that we're talking about. So we need to answer these key questions around how do we gain feedback from residents and businesses who we just wouldn't normally engage in this agenda? How do we move away from sort of the echo chamber of the people that we normally talk to about this agenda and who would say this is a good thing to do? We really need to get to talk to the hard to reach groups, the communities, those types of things, especially particularly challenging given the current environment that we are in at the moment. And how do, the other question, touching on making it real for the man in the street, how do we bring what needs to happen to life, make it very real? So initial ideas, and that is all they are at this moment in time, are around sort of bringing things to life through videos, through animations, through sort of personas almost of what it means to, I guess, somebody like a plumber in 2038. What does 2038 mean to them and their business? Could be through competitions, it could and then through social media and PR campaigns around this agenda. So when we come to the timescales for that's a very, what you see on the screen is a very rough sort of high level sort of timescale to what we're working on at the moment. So the implementation roadmap and policy recommendations, as I mentioned, we already have them. We're sort of digesting them and working out the sort of key messages at the moment. Over the next sort of month and a half, we'll get the draft and final reports for the entirety of the carbon emissions reduction pathway work. And then we're doing a lot of engagement, principally at the moment within the combined authority and West Yorkshire councils. We need to be in a position where West Yorkshire councils and the combined authority are really comfortable with what the findings of this work is saying prior to sort of going out and talking in a public forum about what the exact outputs are. And then ideally, we're aiming for sort of February time to go out and do that public consultation that I've just sort of briefly mentioned. Some key dates to be aware of. So obviously today we're talking to yourselves. We're looking at, as I said, a December, January date to come back to you with some more information. Transport Committee let board. Ultimately, this ends with the CA board on the 4th of February, hopefully giving approval for the public consultation to occur. On that public consultation, we're developing our ideas and thoughts and the materials that we'll need to use in that public consultation over the next couple of months to be ready to go at that point in February. And we'd go out for at least 6 weeks on that consultation period. So something, although this is, to be really firmed up, around 8th of February to the 19th of March for our consultation on this. So that was the first part around the engagement side of things and the thoughts around that. What I wanted to try and do now was just give you a little bit of a flavour of the types of output that are coming out of this work. So what you see in front of you there is around the implementation roadmap that's been produced for the building side of things. And it starts to categorise, the different milestones for certain things like energy efficiency, district heating, heat pumps, as you can see there, and looks at it from the perspective of what is common to all of the scenarios. So you can see there all public buildings and 65% existing homes and businesses have undergone energy efficiency retrofits. Is common to all pathways, and that happens fairly quickly and accelerates out across the 2020s. It looks at this from the perspective of what the differences are with each of those scenarios and how things are subtly different with regard to timescales. It also gives us some real chunky information around when we need to have done things to enable us to get to where we need to be. And then finally, on the right-hand side of things, it tells us what we need to have achieved by 2038. So I don't intend to go through that in any much more detail, really. It's just giving you a flavour of the type of output that's coming from this work with regard to the roadmap itself. You'll notice along the bottom as well, there are some external milestones that have a real bearing on the delivery of the measures that are identified in here. The next one really is the action plan. So again, this is the draft one for the buildings. What this really tries to do is segment the actions up into short-term, medium and long-term actions. Inevitably, you get more information, more detail in those 2020 to 25 short-term actions. Tells you the types of things that we really should be focusing on within the next sort of 5 years. Really helps with that sort of prioritisation process for the region. It also looks sort of medium term about the different things that will need to happen when it comes to the different pathways that have been modelled. And then obviously looking at things at a little bit higher level when we come to the 2030s. And then the final output that you get, and this is just an illustrative example of the information that you receive as part of the policy recommendation side of things. It really gives you a flavour of what the policy or action is, costs and resources associated with that, risks and barriers, who the stakeholders need to be involved, benefits, and then those impacts and interdependencies, so how it relates to other things that are mentioned within the document, but also external factors on that as well. So to give you a little bit of a flavour of some of the things that are coming out of the work, I thought it would be useful to just sort of talk through some things. So what is emerging from this? So one of the things that's been really clear is to have a major publicity and engagement campaign. So this is almost an enabling action which allows support to be provided for the delivery of the policies and actions that are identified across the rest of this work. So you're targeting wide audiences, there are different messages according to the sector, but it really helps with that consistent focus on what our climate ambition is for the region. And that's kind of a long-term proposal. It's about continuous dripping of sort of messaging around this. We can't just do a short start, this is it, without sort of following through. The one that's mentioned there of a West Yorkshire-wide electric vehicle strategy. So this is something that the West Yorkshire Low Emission Strategy Group are already looking at, but this would be very much around increasing availability of public charging points. It could even include a procurement framework for local authorities to use around the EV charge point to get them in place. Supporting infrastructure development, it does what it says on the tin, really. That's whether that's digital, whether that's electricity, whether that's hydrogen, or even any other infrastructure. You know, it's really about helping to try and support that infrastructure deployment. Another one is around a one-stop shop for energy efficiency and low carbon heating. I think a lot of people on this call will probably say, haven't we been there before and done that previously? But this is very much about providing that energy efficiency and low carbon heating information, acting as a single point of contact for residents, landlords, businesses, and giving that tailored advice and about measures and things that people can do to really lower emissions, but also make their houses more comfortable, those types of things. It could provide information on sort of funding and help to support application processes for funding too. Next one down there is around development of the building blocks that allow energy efficiency retro deployment at scale to be delivered. Well, I won't say any more on that because I will steal James's thunder on that one. He'll be talking about that later, so I won't say any more on that. And then the final one really is around a West Yorkshire Spatial Energy Plan, really thinking about how we can be a little bit smarter in designating development areas for future power projects, whether that be onshore wind, whether that be solar, whether that's flexibility through batteries and those types of things. I mentioned this sort of early on in the piece, really around lobbying and the public consultation side of things. So this just gives you a flavour of some of the things that are coming out of the work from a point of view of what we need support and lobbying from government on. So I won't go through that. You can all read what's up there. This is but 5 of, I think it's 27 different lobbying asks that have been identified across the piece as well. So I guess just one thing I wanted to touch on really with this is how this work is how it actually relates to COVID-19 and the recovery. Because one thing about this work is that it was developed in a pre-COVID world. So there are things that have changed as a result of the pandemic, which haven't been factored into the work, unfortunately. You know, the modelling happened before COVID occurred, which obviously we need to be aware of and understand how that changes the work that's happened. Of course, it's impacted on sort of energy emissions information data that's included in this, and obviously has implications for net zero transition. You know, some impacts that we've already seen. You know, we've seen those reduction, delayed growth in travel demand. We've seen increased domestic energy demand, greater reliance on the car over public transports. You know, we've seen a lot more deliveries from sort of the likes of Amazon, those types of people being delivered to doors. So there has been changes that just weren't factored into the modelling in the first place. Obviously, there are opportunities that this brings about, and the recovery obviously has to maximise those, and we need to try to minimise those the risks as well. So I guess we need to capitalise on those changes in work patterns that we're seeing, you know, and also the active travel element. I guess a couple of examples of where we could maximise, but also, you know, we do need to think about that long-term viability of our public transport system, and, you know, it's the patronage levels and how we need to get them up to where they were previously and higher if we're going to get to where we need to be. So I don't think it needs any explanation to say we really do need to closely monitor these trends and are closely monitoring these trends, and make sure that when we are implementing, when we are looking at putting solutions in place that for these pathways, that they are sufficiently agile so that we're responding to those trends that we have seen with the pandemic and how they are responding post sort of pandemic. And obviously this work has very much contributed to the green recovery work and underpinned that proposition that we put into government. So what I wanted to leave you on was really just posing a few questions really in relation to what you've heard today, and very much around getting your thoughts around how we meaningfully engage with the general public and businesses on this agenda, given the virtual world that we're living in at the moment, virtual from a point of view of how we engage rather than, you know, matrix style sort of things. How do we utilize the strengths of the region to really speak to those different audiences? Obviously, digital is a key skill for a key strength for us as a region. An open question to yourselves around how would you like to be involved in this public consultation, either as a panel or even as individuals as well. And then finally, just very much on what I outlined, any additional information that you think we should be including in those draft layouts for the roadmap, the actions and the policies. So I'll leave it there, Simon. Open it out for questions.
That's great. Thank you. No, really super. So let me just, perhaps if you stop screen sharing, then we can just go to a, exactly, there we go. Gallery view, that's great. And then we can flag, you know, we can flick the questions back up again later on if we need them, can't we? So I'm just going to look around for hands going up or other indications that people want to jump in. There were some really clear asks there from Noel, not least in terms of how we collectively, individually, or by leverage on our networks, communicate and engage the wider audience and really sort of start to mobilize this. Just for transparency, I've been speaking with 2 or 3 organisations from an arts and culture point of view to try and understand how we might use their skill sets and networks to begin a different type of communication and engagement exercise. But I'd be really keen to get other views now. I'm just going to quickly get the chat up. So, Neil Walshaw, Councillor Walshaw, can I just bring you in and then perhaps also bring Councillor Ferraby in for a comment on accessibility, and also Councillor Patient in on an engagement-led question. So let's take it in that order. So we're going to go Councillors Walshaw, Ferraby and Patient, and I'm going to be looking at the screen for other people who want to participate. Thanks, Simon. Everyone hear me all right? From my slightly sinister lit lair here in Leeds. It's a really good presentation. It's pleasing to see so much progress being made. I think the key point about the questions about consultation are really central, because folk will be aware. Just for folk don't know, I chair the Climate Emergency Advisory Committee in Leeds and work closely with Councillor Lisa Mulherin, our exec board member for climate change and transport and development. Now, we want to build on our experience with our big climate conversation, and we're really keen that we share ideas as a panel as to how we reach not the usual suspects, because we're fantastic now in Leeds at reaching the usual suspects. We've got a huge database of people involved, got so much involvement, got such a big knowledge base. It's fantastic, but it's how do we take that next step? So, for example, I represent Headingley and Hyde Park Ward, which I don't know how well folk know Leeds, but as you can imagine, it's quite supportive of the things we want to do. It's that kind of place, and that's fantastic. But it's how do we reach the sort of parts in South Leeds and East Leeds? Looking at Leeds as an example, is where we need to communicate folk that these changes, we need permission, don't we, to make these changes, and they'll be hugely in to people's benefit, particularly lots of green new jobs, good well-paying jobs, which is what our holy grail is in. So keen to share as much information as possible about how we're reaching people, because I mean we've got a few ideas, but we're a bit hobbled at the moment. It's not like we can take a roadshow out chair, is it? And meet people, and that's concerning. So I think Leeds, we'd like to volunteer to help as much as we can, but I'm really keen to hear what people have to say about consultation and engagement, and how we can do it for the foreseeable. I was looking on my news
feed just now, and we've got three vaccines are now in train, which is fantastic. So I'd like to think that in 6-7 months' time, we can do things in perhaps more in-person ways, which will be great, and that opens up a lot of ideas we have. But just in case that doesn't happen, I'm really keen to hear what people think about how we engage virtually. Because I noticed someone else has mentioned, Councillor Ferriby's mentioned that everyone has access to IT, and that's a real problem. Just as my ward colleague is Councillor Pryor, and he's responsible for schools, and we've been handing out laptops to disadvantaged people, but it's more than people think. Digital devices are not universal, so how we make progress on all that is my key concern, Chair.
Thank you very much. And as Noel was saying, engaging with the person in the street and ensuring that we meet that person on their own terms rather than on our terms is going to be key for this, and critically shifting from what is essentially a corporate conversation to one that is much more engaging and inclusive, and thereby builds some political capital for those of us on this call who are elected and representing people from an elected perspective is key. I mean, I'll move the conversation on, but before I do, you posed the question. Yep. Do you have any thoughts as to what the answer to your question is? I don't want to imply you should go fully rhetorical, but we can go forwards from here. But I would be interested if you do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, post-pandemic, we have lots of ways we want to do things, and really, I mean, I don't know about other elected members, but I miss that face-to-face contact with constituents, both my own and just more broadly. I really do miss that. So, and it'll be a lot of pent-up energy to sort of take from like my climate team to take the show out on the road, sort of from summer next year onwards. And by that time, also bear in mind, colleagues, by that time we'll have a lot more to talk about as well. Things are moving at a real pace, both in Leeds and across WYCA, and that's fantastic. So the traditional methods, if you like, we're good at, and we can do that. We'll, like I said, we'll be hitting the road, so to speak. But what I'm less strong on, as it were, Chair, is the next 6 months, and also what if things do not go to plan, and could we be sat in here in November 2021 having the same conversation about how do we reach and communicate to people?
Yeah, that's a real risk, isn't it? That's the call to arms, isn't it? So, thank you. That's super. So, Sarah, Councillor Ferriby, let me come to you next. Then we're going to come to Scott, Councillor Patient, after you. So, Sarah, over to you, if I may.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and thank you for the presentation. Really informative. But on the issue of consulting people, I think we cannot rely just solely on new technologies, as a lot of communities still think of them as IT, as a way of engaging. But I think there needs to be some of the old-fashioned, even though we're on the green economy, is that quite a number will want to write in, and it's how we promote the availability of how to engage even in the written communication in the paper format. And also, I think we need to make sure that we hit all communities, older people as well as younger people, because they've seen a lot of changes and have a lot of ideas about how we can progress changing how our views are with the environment. And also, I think some of the ways that we could possibly do it is maybe through businesses and business connections, and getting them to get their employees to engage with the process. In local authority areas, area coordinators that I know we have in Bradford, but I'm unsure about my colleagues across West Yorkshire, and the youth service, and maybe older people's services that can that engage with older people and younger people on a regular basis, that can get information out about the consultation, and it's using as many avenues as possible, so that we're not preventing anyone from any community across our area. We need to make it as easy as possible. But if we're solely relying on IT, we will not get attract those people that are normally the ones that don't engage with consultation processes.
Sarah, thank you very much for that. I'm going to come to you in one moment, Scott. I'm just going to put 2 or 3 people on notice for a comment, hopefully, and they are Melanie Taylor, Jim Cardwell, and Neville Lancaster, because I know from a gas, electricity, and water perspective, you are perpetually in an engagement process with your customers, and we have some learning and wisdom around the table here. So I'd be very keen to hear from that. So I don't mind who goes first, but I'm going to go to Scott, but I'd really quite like to hear from the 3 of you, if that's okay. So Scott, over to you, and then whoever's going to go first between the 3 that I've just completely put on the spot.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chair. I missed bits because I was intermittently batting away young people who wanted various passwords or whatever. But aside from that, no, I agree entirely about the points raised by Neil and Sarah, and especially I think the element about the digital skills gap is really important to consider going forward. And I think there's 2 things. I think the way to perhaps solve that particular aspect is, I don't know if you've done any work with Public Square, and there's sort of a company who do quite a lot of work in terms of open democracy, and they're doing some very interesting bits in terms of a question sort of prudent at the moment in terms of engaging beyond the digital realm. So for example, they've done things like use tokens like you get in the supermarket, where you pop your token into a sort of particular thing, for the charity, just stuff that is in areas where we're sort of reaching people that might not normally engage. I think the idea of bringing on the youth council is really important. We have them sort of front and centre in our climate change working party in Calderdale, and they have some really strong existing networks that I think we can build on. I'm sort of thinking about the realms at the moment that are still open. Schools are still open, so we have an opportunity to engage through that. And I think the other more broader thing is working with, I'm sort of aware that at least 2 of our authorities have done some really big work in terms of their health and wellbeing boards. And I think those sort of health partnerships, arts and culture was mentioned earlier, which is really important. But I think those health partnerships, when we boil it down, we've got the dual errors of COVID and the climate emergency, and they are inherently health emergencies. So getting those people around the table and using their ready-made networks and speaking to people, they are another realm of which is still very much existing in this sort of COVID world at the minute. So I think there's a little bit of work to be done in terms of open democracy. Public Square might be the place that you look towards for that. And I think very much using our sort of health partnerships, and I know that's been done certainly in Leeds and Huddersfield and Calderdale. So there's some sort of wealth and experience to draw from.
Great, thanks, Scott. I'm just going to look to the 3 that I picked on earlier to see who's going to put their hands up to go first. But also as a share, Kate Hainsworth, who is the Chief Exec of the Leeds. I know it's Leeds rather than West Yorkshire as a whole, but from a kind of representative point of view, community foundation, I think. She's got a pivotal role in terms of bridging between different third sector and community organisations. And so she and I had what I found to be a very productive conversation, and we're going to have a follow-up on as well, which is to say, how do we learn from her experience and really not try and go top down, but absolutely develop a communication strategy that's community driven. And perhaps Ben, after we've heard from others, you might have reflections on that, because I know that's an area of passion, insight and expertise for you. So I saw Melanie's hand first, then Jim. So I'm going to go Mel, Jim, Neville, and then I'm going to drop to you, Ben, if I may. So Mel.
Thanks, Simon. I'll probably start by saying, quite frankly, local government are experts in community consultation. And when we've been designing our programmes, we've often look to local authorities in the first instance for inspiration on how to do those well. So you're probably getting yourselves reflected back to you here a little bit in this, but we have most recently completed a really significant engagement programme on our business plan, where we had to engage on really complex issues about what happened with the future of our network along different net zero pathways. So we've had this experience quite recently. I think there's a couple of points that I'd first make. First of all, that it would be really useful when designing this consultation programme to think very clearly at the beginning in terms of what the objectives of that programme might be. I'm not convinced that a programme that looks to necessarily engage very large volumes of people would be the right objective. For me, what would be a better objective is an engagement programme that looks to be representative, so that all parts of society are represented generally in the sorts of numbers that they occur within our community, so that people are, you know, are getting their voice heard. But secondly, that that engagement is of high enough quality and there's enough time in it for people to be properly educated on the issues and given the space to understand the issues fully and be able to respond to them. One of the best things that we did in our engagement programme was use citizens' assemblies. So we brought together a demographically representative group of people from across our network, and we've spent 5 full days with that group of customers, talking them through every aspect of our business plan, helping them to understand the issues that sit beside it, so that when they come to a conclusion in terms of what they want us to do, they feel that they have been given the space and the information to do that. We've been able to do that even in a virtual world by where we have very vulnerable customers who either didn't have access, who were digitally excluded for whatever reason. We've provided them with IT, we've provided them with training. So we've had people that have been taking parts in those events who have never used a computer before, let alone used Zoom before, but have been able to take part in full day virtual roundtables with us. So I would really focus on quality and representation over numbers in order to get the kind of really deliberative consultation that you would want to get for something as complex as this.
Thank you, Mel. That's really, really helpful and a proper sort of from the coalface kind of bit of learning. And Jim, I know you and your organisation are right in the middle of this too, because you are a little behind the gas networks in terms of where Ofgem are from a regulatory pathway point of view. So great to hear from you, and then I'll jump across to Neville, and then I'm going to come back to Ben. And actually, Ben, I hadn't spotted before that there was a question that you'd put into the text as well, so perhaps you might just wrap those two things together in whatever response you want to make, if that's okay. So Jim, I'm going to come to you now.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. And I think some of what I'm going to say is going to be complementary to what Mel's just led with there. Because as you say, we are in our kind of regulatory cycle and business planning cycle, we are just sequenced behind what Mel's been doing and what Northern Gas Networks have been doing. So on the electricity side, these very same questions that have been set out there and others have been commenting on about making sure we get a diverse and inclusive set of views is really important. Also, how we deal with hard to reach segments of our stakeholder base as well is also really important. So I think the thing I would, and I would offer that I've got colleagues who could do a much better job, and we'd be happy to spend a bit of breakout time to go through these in a bit more detail, if you like, and share with a bit more expert insight than I can give, even what we've been doing with some of our panels, because like Mel, we've been running various consumer panels, young persons panels, community energy panels, all sorts of things. So lots of kind of thoughts about what's gone well and what hasn't gone so well, and to share that learning would be good. I wanted to put a couple of thoughts into our heads on this one. One was, of course, one way you can do engagement is to not necessarily think you've got to do it all yourself, and see how much you can mine from that engagement that we or others have done, and try and use that to add to the evidence base, if you like. So I think we will have some stuff that we've done that could be valuable for this purpose. Yeah. And so you don't have to invent it yourself. You don't have to mine the product yourself. You can make use of the stuff that's already been mined and already brought to the surface. As long as you do that appropriately, so as well as using us as existing networks to add on to stuff we're doing and even guide someone, because we're still going, we've still got lots going on at the moment. So is there anything that, the ask I've got, is there anything that we could do that could assist what we're doing here as a combined authority, that could provide evidence and help to this cause? So, where can we join forces, if you like? The second thing I just wanted to say was, we've got to think about, as we get the information back, how do we balance conflicting messages? Because of course, different groups will come back with different views. You just kind of hope that at certain times, if it's this big echo chamber that Neil led out with, in terms of, just the typical mix of a certain community, we want to try and get these conflicting messages, because that's what makes us think about things a bit harder, maybe. And that should be what happens. But we just need to think about how we do that. So there's got to be some judgment applied to that, of course, and we've got to think about that. And the third thing the last thing I had, Simon, about the digital exclusion and people not being able to participate because they might not have the tools or the understanding or whatever else. I guess the other thing to think about is phones versus computers. And I just sort of throw that in. It's a bit like that conversation about just think about the tools and techniques, because I think also clearly we might be wanting to engage with people who are leading busy lives, and this might not be their number one issue that they want to engage with. And a bit like the idea of the kind of putting the counters in the to vote now, if you like, vote which of these three things do you like the sound of the most, kind of thing. That's the sort of thing you can do with phones and small screens, if you like. And I think more people probably have that kind of technology, and there's probably less of excluding people than that. So I just throw that into the ideas mix in terms of the tools and techniques. Thank you.
Jim, that's fantastic. Thank you. And a great build on what Mel was sharing as well. So I think the big message there, and one for us to minute and build back from, is there are wheels that do not need reinventing, and there are entirely valid areas of engagement that have already been undertaken, admittedly for a different purpose, but there's a validity to that if it can be repurposed. And there's a load of learning that you have been either willingly or forced to engage with by your regulator.
Willingly, Simon, willingly.
Willingly, of course. So let's embrace that. So I'm going to come to Neville in a moment. I'm also aware that Mark, I think you had a comment, didn't you, around sort of wider working across the North as a whole, MP11. I don't want to put words into your mouth. So perhaps if we go to Neville, then I think we're going to go to Ben, won't we? Then to you, Mark, and then perhaps we might be around about time. But I'm keeping my eyes out for others. Andrew, you want to contribute as well? And two Andrews. We've got both Andrews that want to contribute. Okay, right. So with that in mind, we're going to go to Neville first, and then to Ben, Mark, and then Andrew Cooper and Andrew Waller.
Thanks, Simon. So just quickly, without adding what's already been said, other than the fact that clearly we engage in many ways and can also support or provide just people who have the expertise or to talk more about what we want if that is something that is required. So please make contact with me and we'll put you in contact with the right teams in terms of engagement. One thing that struck me as doing this is we're actually all going to be engaging on this together, but doing it separately. And there is more about how we join this up better, I think, because to consult once on the matter collectively would be immensely strong anyway. And I know it's on our doorstep in terms of this next consultation, but it does strike me that it's something we can do to join up together and almost jointly sign or jointly promote the overall approach for West Yorkshire, which strikes me as eminently sensible anyway. So I guess really how we do that might be part of what we do as a group to help support the joining up of that where it isn't already. And I guess then in terms of other forms of engagement, I suppose just drawing on the success we've had with our Living with Water promotion in Hull or partnership in Hull, where we have worked so specifically on an outcome, which is to reduce flooding. I wonder if there's something around that in terms of West Yorkshire and living without carbon, just as an example, but actually sort of pulling experts together in a team. It's something that we all need to solve together. We all want to solve together, whether it be EV or whether it be use of electricity in the home. You know, we're working in South Yorkshire at the moment looking at energy use against water use. And actually, from our perspective, whilst we have emissions for the generating the water and putting water in people's homes, I think it's 9 times more energy or carbon is emitted in the home with that same water, because as it's heated. So there's a huge difference here, and therefore, if we're going to reduce carbon or emissions as a group, as a region, then focusing on homes together strikes me as useful in terms of understanding things like water use, energy use combined, because then we can focus on the higher emitters. And then you work into community schemes. How do we reduce it collectively? Well, actually, we need to engage with communities rather than as a whole, because then we can be focused and start to show where emissions are reduced and sort of, you know, we're starting to make this future path. So I do think there's something about us working together in future very closely, collectively, and with the communities themselves to make a change. And the only other point I had really beyond that, which I think would be useful to have a discussion around at some point, is about the education programs we run. So again, I know Mel and Jim will be doing this as well, working with schools. You know, we have a lot of time spent in schools. We have trained teachers who work on the curriculum, looking at water, clearly from our perspective, and its use and role, because that education then goes home and people start to use less water, use it more efficiently, understand it. But it strikes me, again, this is the best way of getting into the home on emissions, on the carbon journey, is to educate in the school, and maybe we can learn from that and put more into education and help.
Join the meeting.
And help collectively to share skills on how that's done, and actually share resources on it as well, because again, it rubs up what we do as a day job. So those are thoughts from me.
Fantastic, thanks, Neville. Really great. And I know the whole living with water, but also water being energy and carbon in disguise agenda is very alive within Yorkshire Water, and thank you for the leadership on that. Ben, I'm going to come to you, then to Andrew Cooper, then Andrew Waller, and then there's a very specific request that's attached to this. So I'll share that with you at the end, and that will keep us, I think, broadly on time, although I'm going to look for chat rather than screen for any other contributions that people wish to make, if that's not too deliberative. So Ben, to you.
Okay, thanks, Simon. So just a couple of quick bits. I'm a bit involved with the project that's come through the National Lottery Community Fund recently, that Leeds won £2.5 million from the Climate Emergency Fund to engage with communities around Leeds. I think they've got a focus on some of those kind of harder to reach, in inverted commas, communities as well. So that might be really useful for this process and good to link into. Part of my work at the moment in digital health, as well as looking a bit into the digital exclusion problem in terms of app-based digital healthcare offerings. So 100% digital Leeds are doing some bits there, and it might be worth looking at what they're doing to start to think about that problem. So they're the quick bits. I won't take too long up there, I promise. I think framing for the consultation is a key point for me. You know, you kind of probably know what I'm going to say, having listened to me on previous meetings, but this can't be, I don't think we can be consulting on net zero alone. I think if we start to try and create the engagement narrative that if we hit our 2038 net zero targets, we've solved the problem is wrong. I think we need to be consulting more around bringing climate resilience into the agenda, and that opens up for me a very different discussion. And there's something in there as well around this kind of what's the opportunity here. Commonly the engagement narrative around carbon reductions is a sort of story of loss, really. So I think we need to bring in a sort of story of opportunity a bit more, start to look at some of the issues that we've got with our society at the moment, and start to bring up some of the benefits that could be brought out through maybe living more locally, more community focused, less isolation, maybe more connection to local food, these kind of things that are going to start to create co-benefits as well. So yeah, I'll stop there on that point. And then the question I put in the chat was just one around funding, really. I'm just interested to know how much of an idea of the funding gap there is for the different trajectories and scenarios. And I'm really interested in looking at a kind of public sector, government focused TCFD process to start to have some really meaningful dialogue with government around, how much money we think they're going to need to deliver against some of this stuff and how much they need to be putting into longer term budgets. I think that could be really valuable and really have a meaningful impact for other areas trying to deliver this stuff as well. It's not an easy task, and it's a bit gazing into crystal balls. It's probably going to need ranges rather than exact figures going more than a few years into the future. I think for me, that's a huge topic. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Ben. That's really valuable. In terms of the different channels by which we engage, I'm really keen that we, as a panel, provide some leadership on that. We've got really rather good at sort of transactional engagement with other already engaged corporates, professionals, and counterparties, which has been helpful, building momentum, but it's not even close to being close to what we need to do. And so if we are going to deliver on the commitments that we're making, we need to reach out and meet people where they are rather than where we are. And that is going to require different channels, different people, and frankly, different skills, probably to the people on this call, certainly different skills to mine. So creative suggestions, ideas, and participation in a different discussion around that, I think is really valuable. That's, I had a conversation with the Yorkshire Sculpture Park with Kate Hainsworth, with an academic at Leeds who's part of the sort of bridging between academia and community, just really to float the ideas as to how can we get some multiple wins around community engagement and the whole carbon piece. But I would be terrified if it was only down to my ideas as to how we take this forward. So I'd really value offline, not now, but offline, other people's perspectives on this. So thank you for that. In terms of the funding gap piece, I suspect, and I'm not about to try and drop a bunch of work on our officer colleagues, but Alan, Jackie, Noel, that probably is something that once we've digested the implications of today's commitments and budgets and what that means, particularly within the devolution agenda, we might be able to provide a paper perhaps ahead of the next GEP meeting, or at least sort of at an appropriate point once we have the insight. Would that be reasonable once we know what the funding landscape looks like? I'm seeing some tentative nodding.
We'll do what we can. Yeah.
At most, it's tentative nodding. But okay, so once we've got some reasonable insight that we can rest upon, we'll share that. Andrew Cooper, I'm going to come to you, then Andrew Waller after Andrew Cooper, and then subject to any other hands up, I'm going to wrap this item up. Mark, I can see you. So, okay, thank you. So, two Andrews then Mark.
Okay, I engaged with a consultation today. It was with the real ale mail order provider Beerhawk, who were asking for my opinion on their delivery. And I did this. I completed it, and the reason that I did it was the prospect of a possible beer voucher, which may come for another purchase. And the point I'm trying to make here is that I think if we're actually going out to consultation, we're trying to engage with people, I think it would be good to at the same time to give them some sort of taste of what it is that a green future might look like. And so that might be £50 off an electric bike, or £100 off solar panels, or whatever it might be. But something which grabs attention and makes people think that actually I want to engage with this, and also here's a bit of a taste of the future that could be on offer. So I think that's worth doing. They worked for Beerhawk, maybe it'd work for us. Another thing that I think is important to look at is what councils and choose to do, and what the combined authority chooses to do, and we've got to make sure that that we're not giving contradictory messages or being perceived as giving contradictory messages. And so big road expansion plans, the transport budget, 660 million of that is going on road expansion and road widening plans. Marrying those things up and are often seen by people as conflicting. The Tongue Relief Road, the A629 widening, Leeds Bradford Airport expansion, these sort of things. And so those choices need to be addressed in some shape or way, some shape or form, to deal with people's confidence. Another area that I think we need to look at is being clear about what the lobbying asks are and noticing the gaps that we have in the pathways. And so looking at the role of the West Yorkshire Mayor going forward, there's powers that are being handed over to government, but not much actually on climate change. And so I think it would be really valid to look at things like a revised national planning policy framework, powers on new build. There's at the moment new build targets are way off, 0 carbon homes 2050. Domestic retrofit, some great work that's being done here, but there needs to be fuel in the tank to actually make that domestic retrofit program happen. And we're still struggling a wee bit with the financing of that. And so some support there would be important. The hydrogen stuff, I just think a plan for green hydrogen, having that in sight would be worthwhile. The EU's got a plan for green hydrogen. I've not seen anything from the UK on that. And at the moment, hydrogen today is part of Boris's 10-point plan. It would be good to see something on that. And similarly with electric vehicles, I also think, fuel cell vehicles are a bit behind in terms of technology, but they have the advantage of not as much in terms of all the battery technology that's required as them. So fuel cell vehicles, it would be good to see something there showing where we're taking that going forward, because some EU countries are a wee bit ahead of us on that area. Some of the tree cutting down that happens, going back to things like the relief roads and these sort of projects, those again can affect people's public confidence in our plans and appear to be contradictory. So I think we need to be addressing that as well. Okay, I think that's about everything I wanted to cover.
Andrew, that's great. Thank you very much. And I think the perhaps if Mel wants to come on briefly on hydrogen, you can. The retrofit piece around homes, that's going to be picked up in our next item. So I'm not going to seek to address that now because I know we have a meaningful update on that. But I think the broader point that you made earlier around, it's quite easy to be distracted into making that which we do better rather than avoiding doing things that will actually create additional harm. As a theme is something we've discussed in the past, and certainly this panel has shared its sentiment in respect of trade-offs around road building, and certainly concerns around the plans for Leeds Bradford Airport in terms of that which we're seeking to do to bring carbon down from the existing economy versus that which we might do that would actually tip things in the other direction. So I think those concerns have been previously articulated, but I'd be very happy for them as long as there's no contention for them to be re-minuted at this panel. Andrew Waller, going to come to you next, and then I think I was going to, where was I going next? I was going to you, Mark, wasn't I? That's right. So so Andrew Waller, then Mark.
Thank you. I just wanted to raise some issues in relation to overlap with North Yorkshire LEP area. I don't want a hard border with Leeds City region, and I think it's important that consultation is done in a meaningful way. The examples that Mel raised in terms of ensuring that it was representative. We don't want a self-selecting audience feeding into the process, it needs to be a fully representative system. But also bearing in mind, Jim, I have never felt so well consulted upon by Northern Power Grid over this summer, certainly with the work that you're looking at doing with the capacity for electric vehicles. And I think that's just something to bear in mind, that I think if I'd had 3 utility companies trying to do the same to me, then I would have needed an extra few hours in the day. So I think it's important to make sure that these processes, not just geographically, but across because the utility companies are going to make a huge contribution to the delivery of this, and you'll be doing it across the area. So it's important that we're not inventing the wheel in different locations. And Mel, just as a no coal, I also hope no fracking. We're doing our best to hold the line there. So, and I think it's in terms of the positives, the new green jobs that could come. It would be important to engage people and attract people to participate if they can see what benefits, rather than going without things. It's the positives that would come from a holistic approach. Thanks, Chair.
Oh, thank you very much, Andrew. I think that's that whole piece around setting the vision, selling the vision, really articulating what the future might look like, which is rather than articulating disbenefits, it's really about articulating, the lifestyle advantages and that which we may acquire collectively as a society, and hopefully the earlier part of this conversation that relates to different types of engagement and communication will pick up on that. But again, let's put that down as an action to make sure that we don't forget it, because I think that's really important. Mel, thank you for volunteering to come in and provide a little bit more structure around the hydrogen point, and then I'm going to go to Mark in the absence of anybody else who wants to come in, and give you, Mark, the final word before we go to a short comfort break before the next item. So Mel, if you want to go full hydrogen, off you go.
Yeah, will do. And it was just to say that I do think actually there really is potential for doing a piece of really meaningful work looking at the potential for electrolysis, so green hydrogen production across West Yorkshire. I think the right time to do that, just thinking back to the slides that Noel presented earlier, is when WYCA is ready to look at what a spatial plan might look like across the area. And I think where we can help there is work with WYCA to indicate where on our network there's capacity basically to inject hydrogen in, as and when obviously we can do that, so that we have points in our network where you can do that and points where it's harder. So I think what we can do is work with WYCA to do a bit of spatial planning around that, and overlay that with data that those guys have around availability of sites and that sort of thing. So I think there's a really tangible, interesting piece of work there. I think it completely aligns with some of the headlines that came out of Boris's 10-point plan today around the fact that there's going to be a hydrogen production target, that there's going to be contracts for difference type mechanisms that will provide the right economic certainty for those projects to go ahead. But I think let's do it at the right time, and I think probably that spatial plan is the right time to do it.
That's great, thank you. Mark, to you.
Thank you, Simon. And the quickest of intros for those that might not know me, I'm a private sector LEP board member, and earlier this year became deputy chair of the LEP board. And I agreed with Roger that as part of that, I tried to attend each of the various WYCA panels across the year to sort of try to help join up the agendas. So I think this is my first attendance at Green Economy. So thank you very much for having me. In my day job, I'm also the founder of Deerhawk. So a great point by Councillor Andrew Cooper. Delighted to see your engagement with us there, and I hope many more orders across the Christmas period. I just wanted to make two very quick points on engagement with sort of different things that I also do across the LEP. I totally agree that engagement needs to be more than digital. The points that were made that we need to be inclusive and we need to engage much more wider with different groups, and digital might not reach all of those. However, the point I'd also make is sometimes we don't often do digital that well either. and we tend to use the same channels that we have previously. Now, one of the other panels I do sit on regularly is the Leeds City Region Digital Board, and I wonder whether we could actually connect these panels and offer the challenge to the digital board, which in theory have some of the best digital minds in our region, to say, if we were going to engage digitally, how might we do that, and see if that can spark some new ideas in. So that was a specific suggestion for digital. Another one, I sort of sit on our transport committee and represent the LEP for Transport for the North, and I think some of the comments in the chat were about how we're going to engage a bit more widely than this region. I guess Transport for the North looks at transport, and transport's only part of our agenda, but it is an important one. And I note that the Transport for the North ambition is for carbon neutrality by 2050, so a slightly different time frame. I just think it's really important we think through how we best engage with organisations like Transport for the North, but there are others that go, at least pan-northern, if not nationally, to make sure that our agendas and the engagement is sort of brought up. And if I can help with that, there is an offer there, but I think we do need to think that through. And I just thought I'd make those 2 points, Jeff. Thank you.
Mark, that's great. Thank you. As I said, we've talked about transport several times before on this panel, and what we've not achieved is enough bandwidth to really fully engage with that discussion. And it's great that you are on that, and I'm a kind of a connection point, and I occasionally attend but generally don't, and that is a bandwidth issue. If there are other ways that we can actually make those connections, that would be super, because you're absolutely right. If we don't get the transport link done properly, then we can't deliver on this agenda. We know that road transport is the most significant contributor ahead of buildings. I think, Noel, I'm looking to you here just to give me a nod in terms of our current emissions. So it is absolutely critical to this. So thank you. I think also the digital point that you make is a really valid one, and we have had some initial discussions from a skills point of view with Rashik, and I think if we can actually create a bit of triangulation between skills, digital, and our green economy panel, they should be mutually reinforcing, and it doesn't really matter where that conversation starts. Wherever it starts, the other two should reinforce it, right? So if it starts with digital, then clean and skills should reinforce that, or any other that you choose to pick. So I think getting that dynamic working really well between the panels should be something that we aspire to during the next 6 to 9 months. I know I'm just checking a whole bunch of stuff onto my own to-do list here, but I think it's a really important thing that we seek to achieve. So look, there's a real call out here in terms of what we're looking at. I think one of them was around comments and feedback around the progress that's been made so far, right, Noel, in terms of the carbon emissions reductions pathway. I think you've probably had that in a fairly fulsome way. The other one is around just that we seek to agree, because we have to agree it formally, an extraordinary meeting, something akin to that which we convened in December. When was it? Probably we've done one in the past, but looking to convene one around December 2020, January 2021, so that we can sign off or endorse the findings of the first 2 or 3 tasks of the piece of work. I might be sort of mashing these words up a little bit, but we need to create a kind of cutout meeting, an extraordinary meeting, so we can actually just review that. That doesn't have to be every panel member, it just needs to be a representative subset, I think. So as long as colleagues are willing to allow that meeting to happen so that we can review and check and then allow progress to continue, then that's what we are proposing. If either Noel, Alan or Jackie would like to turn that comment into real English, then please do that right now. Or that was close enough. So are we happy? So I'm going to take a lack of reaction as acquiescence. I've got a thumbs up from Andrew Kabir, which is great. Another thumbs up from Sarah. So, okay, great. So we will do that. So the appropriate point in December or January, a group of us, TBC, will gather around the findings and allow them to progress, because we needed that from from a governance point of view. Super, right. So what I'm hoping to do is to land this meeting at around about 6:30 rather than 7. We have a really important agenda item coming up. James, I think you're going to be leading us through that, and it's the one that was previously trailed. It was around the way that we scale up the efficiency, the Better Homes Yorkshire plan, as it's called. So energy efficiency from a domestic perspective. So let's take a short comfort break now. It's 5:24. So if we come back at 5:30, if I can ask you just to knock your cameras off now, so I know you've gone. And then when you come back, put them back on again, so I know you're back, and we'll start at 5:30.
joined the meeting.
Hello, everybody. Just going to give it another minute or two for others to come back from the kitchen with their cups of tea or whatever they are bringing with them. Okay, so welcome back. Thank you very much. We have another substantive item. Sometimes in these meetings we have a sequence of small things. This one really is built around two significant ones. The first one, obviously, arguably one of the most important things we can discuss around the carbon emissions reduction pathways. So thank you for all your contributions on that. I noticed in the chat side, most of you have spotted it, no doubt, that Jackie was just offering up the opportunity to participate in the meeting where we go through the results and the communications plan. Really key. So if you haven't seen that, let me just extend that offer verbally. Please do respond in whatever way you wish. If you would like to be part of that, we would genuinely welcome your participation. And in terms of delivering on those objectives, those ambitions, one of the most significant things we have available to us, of course, is dealing with the homes that are across our region. And I know that there are a number of people here. I'm not going to pick them out, but I'm looking at you, Alice, and you, Andrew Cooper, who have had a lot of experience and input and very passionate perspectives in terms of how we do effectively retrofit the homes that happen to exist across our patch. If we don't do it, we won't be able to deliver on those objectives that we've set. So James Brass is going to be leading us through a paper which hopefully you've managed to read. There's quite a lot of detail in there. So James, I think you're going to, whilst we're taking it as read, you're also going to be quite kind to people and pick some of the key themes out, aren't you, in terms of the technicalities too, and then prompt the discussion from there. And it's really going to be summarising what is I guess, the recently scaled up Better Homes Yorkshire report, its recommendations, and how we go through an approach to building a longer term strategy for energy efficient retrofit across West Yorkshire. So it's a big one. And so on that basis, we're going to put about an hour to it and then leave a little bit of time for A or B at the end. So James, to you, I'm just going to mic off. I'm going to hand it across to you, and then we'll leave plenty of time for discussion at the end. And I think you have one or two very specific questions and asks as well, don't you? So, James.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and good evening, everybody. So I'm going to take you through a few slides. Yeah, just to say before I do, the cover paper just try to summarise the full report, which is it's about 70 pages, and it really picks out some of the key recommendations. And what we're looking for this evening is for endorsement of those going forward. And then, Chair, if I take it, we'll go back to the three recommendations in the cover paper at the end. Just to,
yeah, we'll pick those up at the end.
Yeah, do.
We'll leave it open for sort of comments, reflections, questions, and all the rest of it. And then we'll drop on those three specifics at the end.
Great stuff. So yeah, so I'll just try to share my screen. Just give me a moment. Okay, here we go. Hopefully you can all see that by now. So yeah, the presentation, I'm going to try to pick out some of the key recommendations and what we call in the building blocks. I'm not going to go into a lot of technical detail, the sort of the figures around the carbon, the technologies, or even so much as the costs. There is some detail in the report, so if you have got any questions, I'll try to deal with them at the end. But yeah, this is just about the building blocks, really. So just try and move them on. Great. Yes, just a little bit of background. I think it's pretty clear by now that that homes, the domestic energy efficiency is going to play a really big part in tackling the climate emergency. And so it's just how do we do it, really? I think Noel's also mentioned, the economic recovery from the COVID-19 crisis, and it was certainly part of our net zero proposition late in the summer to government, particularly in terms of what we homes, the number of homes that we're going to put into the low carbon pipeline and where the jobs are coming from. I mean, as a panel, you've heard the sort of major project updates from the Better Homes Yorkshire Partnership, and so the project itself looks at sort of renewal of that delivery in part. I mean, the starting point for the project, we were looking at the kind of market barriers to retrofit and why it's not a particularly attractive proposition for many households. So the demand's not really there for energy efficiency, particularly some of the more expensive stuff like solid walls. It's not really at the top of a lot of people's list. Perhaps a kitchen, a bathroom, or a holiday come higher up, and sort of linked to those high costs. It's not really the supply chain, the sort of capacity and capability to do it. It's particularly the whole house stuff that we'll go on to is really quite niche at the moment. And of course, linked to the high cost, there's not really been attractive ways of paying for retrofits. So these were the kind of starting points, and I think the report's done quite a good job at addressing those and getting into how we overcome those barriers. So this next slide is just a bit of a reality check, really. We've got a good track record with the Better Homes Yorkshire. Over 5,000 homes and counting have received measures. It's continuing with the Green Homes Grant, the government's big ticket item this summer. Yeah, so there's quite a bit of delivery going on, and it continues to use the Better Homes Partnership. So that said, the contracts with the local authorities come to an end in 2023. So it's a really good time for us now to be planning for, thinking about the pathways to net zero, what are the new things that we need to do and sort of to open that up again. In terms of this, in West Yorkshire, the stock that we've got, there's about 1 million homes, and the estimates, and caveat, they really are estimates. Hopefully I've underestimated the energy efficiency, but maybe up to 80% are below an EPCC. So that's kind of what's considered as good. So you know, the 80% that are less good going to need some attention. So that's, you know, roughly speaking, 800,000 homes. Now that's a lot of homes to do. That's 80,000 a year if we do it over 10 years. And so scaling up is perhaps an understatement. In terms of, you know, the social side of this, 12% of homes in West Yorkshire are considered to be in fuel poverty, and that's really exacerbated by the poor performance of the buildings, that the homes that they're living in. So it's quite entrenched in some places. And of course, in terms of carbon, homes are a little over a quarter of CO2 the CO2 footprint for the region. So it's quite a significant contributor. The aims and objective for the project, the Scaling Up Better Homes project, at the start of this year, we wanted to look at schemes elsewhere. Good practice, delivery across the UK and beyond, looking to Europe. What's worked well, what's worked not so well, and picking up the best practice and learning from those. The second part was looking at the funding and finance. And this third was looking at the supply chain, the skills. And we've got some recommendations now we want to share with you. So the project team kind of early on in the process sort of highlighted some principles for retrofit, things that sort of need to be there. So first of all, developing a trusted offer, and that's really focuses on the householder as a consumer. And really looking at products, retrofits that offer high quality and give people that confidence. We've all had tradespeople come to our homes, and you just want to know, you know, are they trustworthy? Have they got a good track record? So it's absolutely essential. And then in terms of building the market, well, obviously we've got different tenures, so people are renting, the social renters, and then people that own their own homes. So that's kind of, you know, almost like three different offers. But then obviously the circumstances for within those tenures are all very different. So it's about having, you know, building the market is having an offer for those different groups, and fit for purpose is about, you know, we're very focusing now on a whole house solution, solutions that get us to net zero homes, but also things that really work well. You know, they perform in real life, and things that we won't regret doing later on. And then, of course, ways of paying for it. So absolutely, well, first of all, there needs to be the capital there, so a fund that we can invest in housing. But then that needs to be, for many, it needs to be, you know, allow access to finance that's really accessible and affordable. It's easy. So easy ways of paying for retrofit, I think, is part of it. And then delivery. We've got to develop the supply chain, the partnerships, and have that skilled workforce to meet the previous bits, which are all about demand. So it's getting the supply there as well. And from those, we arrived at these components, and this is from sort of was 30 to 40 schemes that we looked at, and the matrix starts to pick out those components, but there are 10 on the left-hand side. That I'll go on to in a bit more detail. I think at this point it's fair to say that, you know, out of all the schemes and that we looked at, there wasn't really one single scheme that can do the sort of things we're talking about, you know, that we could effectively replicate. So a lot of people talk about what's happening in Scotland and what they're able to do. I think, you know, there's bits and pieces of good practice, but we felt like there's not going to be one single scheme that can do all this. There's going to be different entry points for householders depending on their circumstances. So the next kind of key bit was that all of this 1 to 10, these components are important. So we can't really do prioritizing and say we'll do work on the customer journey now, and then, you know, we'll figure out the finance vehicle later. You know, that the two these things are kind of interdependent. So, you know, it's all right having a great loan, but, you know, where's the product? So it's that kind of thing. So the ones that I've highlighted, the ones in red, because these are things that we can start working on locally and regionally, and so wanted to focus attention on those. So first of all, customer journey. So a lot of us in the LEP are really accustomed to sort of having this sort of customer journey set out. It's quite simple. On the left, it starts out with a referral, bit of interest. Hopefully you start to move through towards assessments, getting a decision, having some work done. It's key to note the last one, the post work, is that that's included, and we're not forgetting what we've done once it's in there. So it's kind of that evaluation as well. So that's it in very simple terms. What's important in that customer journey is that there's trusted advice. You know, we've all had sort of cold calls about various, you know, from sales and products, and you know, people knocking on it. You know, you want that trusted advice. I think that's obvious. And a lot of people in the literature and in the interviews that we've done think that local authorities are really well placed, and you know, they're the honest broker. But there's been others like the Energy Savings Trust have done a good job over the years, so that's important. And then the building stock data, you know, to do this well, we need to see what progress looks like as we start to deliver schemes, and so we need a stock model, if you like, that has some information. Doesn't have to be perfect, but sort of says what age the property is, you know, something about the material. So we can start getting into that customer journey, having some early insight, and also to sort of help us to deliver schemes, you know, and target them. In terms then of the market intelligence is about the people that live there. So it's the occupants, what are their preferences, you know, having that intelligence tells us something about, you know, when they're going to make a key decision. The obvious one is when you move house. So having that insight is something that, you know, can help us build the market, I think. And then the show homes, the bits that really bring it to life. So ideally, you'd have one of these on every street, a show home that's a whole house retrofit, starts to demonstrate the value, people seeing scaffolding going up. So, you know, it starts to make it real. So that's the bit around the building block, if you like, around customer journey. I've included the graph here on, you may have seen this before, it's on technology adoption curve. It's called the Rogers adoption curve. And it works on the basis that you've got these innovators at the first 2.5%, then you've got early adopters, and then the laggards and so forth at the tail end. There's some figures you can't quite see, but in the report they've tried to show how that would fit against the numbers of homes we want to see retrofitted. We don't necessarily have to take that approach, but certainly there's been a lot of talk about early adopters not necessarily wanting something that pays back quickly, but they want to do it, you know, to do the right thing. So it's something to think about in terms of how we approach this. So there's a big part on monitoring and data. I think it's something that's often missing. I see this as part of bringing the kind of energy efficiency into the 21st century, and kind of, you know, what data can actually do to help us continually improve. So, you know, that pre and post work monitoring to actually know what's working well in real life, and then getting that the feedback from the contractors and the users. You know, it's simple stuff. It's continual improvement, and ultimately that is something that's going to need to bring the costs down. And then from a regional perspective, we want to have sight of that. That's what the report is saying, that we have a data repository that starts to collect this data, this information. So you know, so we can continually improve on this, because it's at very early stages, this industry, if you like. So the next bit is the building block is PV and storage. So clearly we all know that about solar energy, you know, cleaner energy onto the grid is going to help save carbon. But the proposal in here is that what solar and storage can do is really start to attract additional revenues. And it's a bit of innovation in thinking, if you like, in the report that says, look, you know, all right, consumers at the moment can't access, can't start to sort of trade with the grid, but with aggregated systems. So a number of systems, you know, can start to be aggregated and start to generate income. So that's doing that under a single point of control. and it's really a business opportunity. But what the report sets out is that, look, there's some potential revenues in here. If they were accessible, they could go further and start to pay for more retrofits. You start to get a deeper retrofit. So that's in there, one of the building blocks. And of course, the finance. The proposal is to do more work, unfortunately, to look at what a finance vehicle could offer households in the region. The key premise is that you access low-cost finance, so it suggests public borrowing, local investment, but the low cost of capital is really important, because obviously you pass that on. In the section on finance, it talks about progressive lending, so we need to test this, but what it suggests is that the more able to pay a slightly higher rate, and that's progressively, so it's effectively cross-subsidized the less able to pay. There's bit in there as well about equity lending and loans that repay when the property's sold. So it really kind of it looks at basically people are on much lower income and offers them products that enable them to upgrade their homes and not have to pay anything until the property is sold. So all of this needs testing, but what it's hoped to do is start to build that confidence, so people can see that the finance is there. You can start to get sight of the pipeline, and then businesses and individuals start to think, well, there's a future in this, so I'm going to invest. So it's building that confidence. It's part of the picture. And then in terms of the finance vehicle itself, the ownership, well, there's evidence in there on social enterprise, community interest companies offering this in the Southwest. Got Sheffield Council doing home appreciation loans. So there's little bits here and there, and then obviously building societies. So the graph that's there kind of like shows how, the lower interest rates, it's the public loans, so it's the red line, where that crosses with the bill savings is kind of, you sort of break even, so that the savings are more, pretty much equal to the loan repayments, but anything before that, it's what used to be called the golden rule under the Green Deal. But it shows how the lower cost of interest allow a deeper emissions reduction. So I hope that's clear. Scalability, the next building block. This is about delivery, and we talked about the Better Homes Partnership. Well, the contracts come to an end in 2023. So what are the routes to market? So there's a few options set out that are worth looking at. First of all, in looking at the expanding arrows at the bottom, it's just a bit of an excerpt from the report. There's a recommendation to start to build competitions, and they're saying 300 deep retrofits, setting up a competition, and the project management around that, start to sort of engage the market and recruit contractors to build a pipeline. So the next one is the retrofit works model. So this is where we've been looking elsewhere in the UK. I think it's Sussex, Oxfordshire, Brighton have got a retrofit works chapter, if you like. It's an arm of, and what the retrofit works model is, why it's really interesting is because it's a cooperative model, so it brings in advocates for a bit like local authorities, health services and so forth. It brings them in as members along with contractors, and all the contractors on the retrofit works cooperative, the group, they're all approved, and they all work around a quality management system. So the work that they're doing is to the right standard. It's a different route into market, but it's one that's the recommendation is to set up a chapter of. So we've been talking with Leeds Council and the Climate Commission there, who are particularly interested in that. And the way that it's often seen is that it's a good way for you can start to work with those early adopters that are mentioned in that adoption curve earlier. And then the next one is, as an option, is special purpose vehicle, and this so it suggests looking at setting up an external company as a joint venture. Where we've seen this work is with local authorities, has been with regeneration schemes, and particularly through delivery, housing delivery. It's not really been, there aren't really any examples of it being done on retrofit, but it could be a way to do this, particularly on an area-based level. So there are really options that are set out that we can start to explore a bit more with partners. And the last building block is workforce and skills. Of course, it's so important. So a large workforce is needed. The little bit of high level modelling that they've done says that we need about 30,000 people working in this area to deliver the scale that we're after. But we're already on the back foot, because we know from the evidence that we've got is that there are already gaps in the construction sector, in the trades. Firms find it difficult to bring new apprentices on. And for workers and firms, there has to be a future prospect. They have to see that clearly, the opportunity in order to invest in their own skills or invest in their staff. The report goes on to say there is a shortage of professionals, so we're going to need to bring more of these professionals into retrofit, because the whole house it needs a much greater degree of coordination than so surveyors, architects and designers. And then in terms of investing in skills infrastructure and facilities and courses, what we're hearing is that the skills providers and the colleges, they really want to see that signal from the employers, and they really want to see the line of sight to their jobs. So at the moment, there's lots of projections around and saying this is going to happen, but they're not getting the signal from the employers. And you may have heard this before, but it's something that we need to start talk about and build that confidence, because if we in the past 10 years, we've all heard about this kind of stop-start, the uncertainty in policies, and it's not a good effect on the skills system. So my final slide, the key recommendations. A lot of this, I don't want to repeat too much, but first set up a financial vehicle. So there's an explicit recommendation to do the feasibility study to see test some of the assumptions. There's things like if we're going to charge interest, if such an agency charges interest, they're going to need to be Financial Conduct Authority regulated. So the things like that need more work. The solar PV and storage, what needs to be done there is the opportunity is kind of quite new. So whether or not those revenues are accessible or not, and how they can be realised is uncertain. So the proposition is to roll that back into a retrofit fund, but how accessible are they, and how could that be achieved? The options I've talked about, there has to be a route to market, particularly for local authorities that's compliant. So we've set out those options in the previous slide, but because the question is, what's the level of intervention that's going to be needed? Is it all the way into a joint venture, or is it a procurement exercise? Down to D, this is one of the recommendations in the cover report, actually, is that we want to create and resource a community of interest. So it's a much wider range of stakeholders and some that can oversee the data and the progress on this sort of 10-year plan, if you like, that have sight of that intelligence and the customer journey for each property, so to really sort of take charge of that and take it forward. And then under E, I've mentioned the 300 demonstrators. That's a key one. There'll be so much learning that can be done through building those competitions, I think. And then the final one is looking at where we can attract funding to bring more training provision into the region. There's some particular barriers around the new standards, the standards for retrofit. There's a bit of a technical one. It's called Past 2035, and a lot of trades out there are not accredited. So there's courses on insulation that we're going to need, particularly for solid walls. So there's a lot of things need doing, and it would be great if we could bring it into the region to do that ourselves. The key recommendation is to do a little bit more work, auditing the skills and the provision that we've already got. And that brings me more or less to an end. Just a couple of questions in, of the 6 that have set out the building blocks, what's the panel's view on these? And is there any particular areas that you'd like to get more involved in? And I'll just leave it there.
Great, thank you, James. There's been a lot of, I'm not sure if you've been looking at the chat, you probably haven't. There's been a lot going on in there whilst you've been presenting, which is a really good sign. So let's just recap on the 3 questions, and I'll try and draw through a number of people who've been sort of flagging up their wish for questions. So the first one really is a simple one, which is to note the recommended approach and the proposed building blocks for the development of a long-term plan. That's the first ask, isn't it, James, I think? And the second one really is to endorse the establishment of a community of interest group, or something similar to that, at least, but yes, something along those lines, that will drive the development of a longer term plan, with project plan with resource implications mapping through to be drafted and returned to this panel in, remind me, it's certainly next year. Is it first year or something of that nature?
I think it's December, January, but yeah, we'd like to come back with a plan for this on how we implement.
Yeah, then just for the minutes, we'll say early next year, and if you get it ahead of that, that's great. But if not, let's go for early next year. And of course, there's a sort of generic sort of call to arm, because this is really important as to how people would like to lean in and support this. Very similar to the last ask. But looking at the questions here, Richard, Richard Goodfellow, I'm going to go to you first, because we've not heard from you on this discussion. There's a couple of points you've made here around finance and some of the structures, which I think are really valuable. So I'm not going to try and interpret your questions. I'm just going to ask you to re-articulate them. Then I'm going to come to Mel Taylor, and recognising that Andrew Cooper, Councillor Cooper, has something he wants to take offline. So perhaps a colleague can just pick that up and make sure that conversation happens. And then after, we're going to go to a couple of others, and Andrew Cooper again with a different one. So a bit of a long list, but we're going to go to Richard, then Mel in the first instance.
Yeah, so thanks Simon, and apologies in the background, and apologies my video was off. I'm trying to balance a teacher-parents evening with doing the panel, so it could all go horribly wrong. Really, it was more an observation that I think, having been through the Green Deal finance debacle a few years ago, I think one of the lessons that really came out of that was trying to use where we could existing structures that actually are successful in reaching into the sort of places that we're looking at. So I was simply making the observation around using social housing providers, social housing finance, that sort of pathway. And I think Alice picked that up, just for those who weren't looking at the chat, and sort of nudged people towards that's been happening in Wales. But really the overall point was about trying to use as many existing pathways as possible, not trying to reinvent the wheel. Not that you were saying that at all, by the way, but it was simply as I was mulling over how difficult it can be to reach people and to get excited about this subject. The Housing Association, they're pretty creative when it comes to how they do finance structures. So really it's a statement and an offer. I'd be very happy to lean into that whole structure area and continue to help. That's all. Thank you, Simon.
Well, thank you. That's a great observation. Thanks also for the for offering to lean in on that. That's going to be really important. Mel, let's go across to you next.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. And one of the things that really struck me, James, and I kind of got stuck on it, you said it at the beginning of your presentation, was how one of the big issues, barriers to scaling up the programme is actually demand. We can create the best programme, an absolutely amazing customer journey, but if there isn't the demand there, or if there is the initial demand, but then there are little barriers within that customer journey that make demand drop away. So that's why I was quite interested to know whether, from the work that you've done over the past years that the programme's been running, whether we could see some analysis of feedback at different points during that customer journey and understand where, if people have fallen off, at what point they've fallen off, just so that that could give us a little bit of a better insight of where we might want to focus in improving that in future. Certainly, there are clearly things that you can do to increase demand. And I was on, I think it was the CBI skills call recently, where we were talking about the impact of what had happened since the Green Homes Grant had been launched. And one of the things that had happened really quickly was that mismatch between supply and demand. And there were anecdotes on that call about people who had tried to find a supplier to do something under the Green Homes Grant in Cornwall being directed towards suppliers in Rochdale. That was the closest supplier to them, because there was just this complete mismatch between supply and demand. So it's possible to get the demand there, clearly, if that program's anything to go by. But then I think it's just looking at each stage of that journey and understanding which bits have worked well before and perhaps where they haven't.
Thanks, Mel. I think we might have actually lost James for the key part of that comment question. So I'm going to look at both Jackie and Noel in the hope that they'll be able to fill. And then, unless James actually did hear it. Did you hear it, James?
I caught the last bit, Mel, of what you were saying about demand and where that customer journey and where people are dropping out. Yeah, it's a really interesting point. I've not uncovered data on that, but I think we can learn a lot from what's the I think it's Warmer Homes Scotland, and maybe go back to the partnership and sort of take a bit of a deeper look at that. I know they sort of moved away from the retail and the kind of mass marketing, so they're working more on local schemes, increasingly on local schemes, but maybe when they started out, they've kind of got some of that data that we can use to figure out where people are kind of where people do lose interest and why. So it's a good point. Thanks.
Thank you, James. Did that cover what you were asking, Mel? Or do you want to?
I think it did, but I think there's also just an offer of support there that if it's helpful, we can talk. We've done a lot of this, looking at where the pain points are in our own customer journeys, just so that we can prioritise a little bit more where we look to improve those, and we don't spend lots of time working on a part of the customer journey that's actually working really well for people, and just make sure that we're focusing on the bits where we know we're losing people. So if that's of help, James, if you've got access to that kind of data, then we could talk you through how we've done that. Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you, Alice. I've got you. I saw your hand sort of manually come up via the chat. I'm also looking at the other hands up. So I think, Jim, is yours a recent hand up, or is it a legacy hand up? It's a recent hand up. Excellent. But so I'm going to go to Ben first, and then I'm going to come to you, Alice, then to you, Jim. And whilst we're hearing from those three, I'm going to be looking for others who want to participate. And if there aren't any, we will wrap this session up at the end with a reflection back on the three questions that were posed. So let me know, either sort of via your cameras or frankly, however you want, really. Right, so Ben to you, then to Alice, then to Jim.
I think my point got answered by Alice in the chat. It was just a technical question around potential contradiction points between low carbon and adaptation agendas, but it seems it's being considered, so that's fine.
Okay, thank you, Ben. So to you then, Alice.
Thanks. And the point that Ben raised in the chat is actually a really important one, and because it's a criticism that's frequently raised, actually, whether it be people believing that insulating their homes is going to give them damp problems, or going to give them indoor air quality problems, or lead to overheating. So I think it's worth reiterating this core message that actually a whole home retrofit plan is about a retrofit for future functionality, of which low carbon and energy efficiency is a part. So, thanks, Ben, for highlighting that risk. I think it's important to draw attention to. People won't be surprised to know that actually my struggle in commenting structure my comments so that they actually are kind of
tractable and useful for the work. I wanted first of all to say that I'm really pleased to have been peripherally involved in the work that James has been leading, because I think it's a genuinely concerted whole system approach to make a radical transformation. So, kind of kudos for that. We also perhaps just need to be aware that it's part of a current, there's a moment here about proper transformation of our building stock nationally, and the construction industry is actually, and I'm involved in the Construction Leadership Council's proposal, which are going into bays in the next couple of weeks, for a national retrofit strategy that would enable government to put the kind of money that it's flagged is available through the Green Homes Grant, but then devolve that down to locally supported and regionally implemented solutions that reflect the housing stock, the capacity and the like. So that's one to watch. And I know James and team are already plugged into that, but they're effectively, the industry is now trying to bring together the piece that will enable regionally specific programs to happen. And finance is a key part of that. For what it's worth, financing the measures themselves is not actually the biggest barrier, although if you're an individual homeowner, of course it feels like they're a bigger barrier. Funding that key bit of evaluation and post-op monitoring, so that we learn, we build capacity, because where's the value in that to the individual homeowner? The benefit and the value comes elsewhere in the supply chain. So if we have regional funding, it's worth thinking about directing it to the things that can't be funded elsewhere, and the evaluation of the learning, the measures themselves. I think the other point I'd make is that adoption curve, the numbers involved are terrifying, right? And the first thing anybody says is, how many houses a week for the next 15 years? That's not going to happen. And it's an instant turn off. But if, for those of you who are mathematically minded, if you take that kind of bell curve of the innovation curve and you think about it in cumulative terms, you end up with a slightly less scary S-curve with a gentle gradient and a lot of learning, building up to a much more accelerated RAF, and then tailing off as you manage to actually kind of get to the really difficult to do stuff. So I think we need to avoid thinking in straight lines about this as well, and think about a graduated program that takes place over a year and then enables the capacity of the supply chain to be built, because the Green Homes Grant is an object lesson in how not to do things, okay, in terms of it's done with the best intent, it's got fantastic resources behind it. The industry was not consulted and has no ability to respond, but also very little incentive, because do you know what? Construction's really busy anyway. They don't need the work, right? So why would you do something that's more difficult, if you don't have to? So I just, sorry, Chair, I know that's a little bit of an unstructured rant, but there's some key points there. I put no points about financing in the chat, and I'm happy to leave those for specific follow-up.
It wasn't an unstructured rant at all. It was a very articulate ramble, and a very good one at that. And look, thank you for that. I think for me, a number of things stuck out. One was the cross-reference to what Richard was saying before around the finance, and that's a really important place. The other one, of course, was a cross-reference to what we were talking about earlier, which is about how we engage effectively on this and the communication piece, and actually selling that vision rather than that terrifying, as you say, linear trajectory, which is unrealistic and unattainable. We don't operate in straight lines. It's far more likely to be a bell curve that is addressable, and I think weaving that into a story that people can engage with is really important. So your leadership on that, Alice, is really valued. Thank you. Now, where was I going? I was going to Jim next, wasn't I? Then I was going to start looking for others before I go AOB. So Jim, let me go to you. Then I'm going to go to chat to make sure I've not missed anybody.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. So some sort of feedback from me. I thought it was a good paper. I like the thought about trying to get away from boom and bust in policy and try to come up with something that we can sustain trying to build momentum and then sustain and build on. And I think that's really encouraging. And the other thing I like to sort of pick up on Alice's, I've forgotten the polite way of saying it now, but the not a disruptive rant, but a nice ramble, a very interesting ramble. But the key point there was that sort of whole system point.
Sorry, Alex. Sorry.
It sort of recognises the all the bits of the jigsaw that need to come together, and I think it does it very well. The specific bit of feedback, and I just wanted to highlight to you, James. I threw it into the chat room, but when you're speaking, it's difficult to keep an eye on the chat room as well. I appreciate that, but clearly we're the people to lean in and help on that storage and solar point that you raised. One of the recommendations I've just thrown a link to our website. We did a study with about 40 homes over 2 years, just outside Barnsley, with community energy organisations and indeed people who do the kind of thing you're talking about there, which is about aggregating a number of households and allowing households to sell their services into the energy system, if you like, and gain some reward from doing that, which also benefits all people as well as the people who are doing that as well. So yeah, we think that proved a lot of points there. So happy to go through that, James, but I just wanted to link you to that point so you can replace that photo of Lancashire with a nice photo of South Yorkshire instead. Try and get a bit closer to home next time would be an upgrade on your presentation. Thank you.
Apologies for the Lancashire reference.
We're a broad church, it's fine.
No, thank you. That's super. So there was, I did previously flag that Andrew wanted to come in. He has had to leave the meeting, but he's left some comments in there. Scott, is that you adjusting your camera or flagging to me that you want to come in? It's the camera, right? Okay, fine. So let me just glance around. I can't see anybody, electronically waving their hand, but let me just see if anybody wants to do that physically. No. So then let's just recap, and James, help me out if I get these wrong. I've got them jotted down here. So we want to note the recommended approach and the proposed building blocks and so on and so forth. So I think we can take that as having been done. Everybody's been very present, so that they are noted. Do we endorse the establishment of a new community of interest group or something similar to that to drive the development of the long-term plan? I'm just going to look for physical nods or other kind of affirmatory body language. Yep, I think that's looking good. And of course, we now know that's going to come back around the loop when you're ready, early doors next year, James, isn't it? So good. Right, super, thank you. It's 6:16, so we have about a quarter of an hour until 6:30. So we're going to go to AOB, and there. No, we're not. I'm terribly sorry. We're going to go to the major projects update. Of course we are, which relates to climate emergency and other things. So we're taking those as read. They're all in the papers. We're going to do that as we normally do, but let's create a little bit of space and just let anybody come in with questions or points of clarification, whatever it is that they want. So let me just sort of go around the screen, and I'm just going to do it clockwise from where I am. So Jim, anything on major projects from you that you wish to ask, and rather than just letting the whole screen go passive, I'm just going to go and call it out. So Jim, no?
No, thank you, not for me.
Alice?
No, other than I thought the red, amber, green risk rating was really helpful, but I wasn't sure if it changed what we had to decide and note. So that perhaps might, don't answer it immediately, see if anybody else kind of has a similar query.
Okay, well we'll come around to you presently, Jackie, and maybe you can just sort of pick Alice's. I think that's a really good question, actually. Natasha, you're next on my screen here.
Nothing expressly on that other than just again to throw it into the mix now. So there's been a bit more of a precedent of public sector buying green power. So we acted for City of London, 50 megawatts, and it actually saved them money. It was announced today. So they've met some of their objectives and ended up saving 3 million potentially over 15 years as well. So I know I've been going on about this for a while, but again, I'd be very happy to talk to the right people again about trying to buy and get together and procure green power.
Great, really interesting. When that's sort of fully public domain, is that something we can just circulate?
It is in the public domain. It was announced in The Guardian today, and they announced it at Resource. It's actually, it's not signed, but everyone's announcing it, and so it's fine. It is in the public domain. It's virtually signed, but they've been through the tender process, and Vitalia have been selected, so it's just a good example. And I know we've discussed it a few times before, so I raise it again. I'm happy to sit down with the right people and to look at potentially what we can do on that avenue.
Super, thanks, Natasha. Maybe it's if there's some useful links that can be circulated via Jackie or Nell or colleagues.
Yeah, shall I circulate the Guardian link that which just sets out the high level what the parameters of the project was?
Whichever you think is the best one, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, okay.
I'm about to jump over you, Alan, unless you've got something you want to comment on this. Yep, okay. Mel?
No, no,
Mark?
nothing from me. Thanks, Simon.
Mark?
Sorry, nothing from me, Simon.
Okay. Jackie, do you want to just pick up on the RAG status bit, and then I'm going to come across to Ben after you've touched on that one.
Yeah, well, I'll keep it really simple. I mean, the RAG rating is there to just try and give you all a bit of an indication as to how our major projects being, either adversely affected or slowed down. So I think the message is that they are all, being slowed down by certainly the first lockdown. Second lockdown obviously is hopefully shorter, but we're not anticipating any major issues. But other than the fact, like I say, it's just some delays to the process, mainly the fact that we can't always get on site quickly enough.
Thanks, Jackie. Ben, to you.
I guess maybe a question for Natasha actually, but just to pick up on that, the comments around power sourcing. I think it's quite a complicated thing in this area is around whether you can actually count it as carbon neutral power or not, because a lot of the stuff that you can buy as green energy you can't, can you, under GHG reporting guidance? So
that's right. And maybe I could jump in. Yeah, my pet area at the moment. But you're right, and that's why most companies and corporates and public sector need to meet what's called additionality. So you have to, so that's why it's quite hard. So what a lot of corporates historically have done is what's considered greenwashing and doesn't meet all the targets, which is you go to npower or SSE and you say, I want a green tariff, and all you're doing is buying green power that's already on the system and you're not moving the dial at all. So additionality means if it wasn't for Leeds City Council buying power from that wind farm would never have been constructed. Because they were buying 10 years power, that meant equity and debt went into that project. So most people want to meet additionality. Having said that, there are still some major corporates we work with and have done deals with who are still satisfied with RE100's concept. You don't actually need additionality, but I agree, it's better to have additionality, and then you have no risk at all of greenwashing at all.
Okay, thanks.
Great, thank you both for the question and the answer. That's really helpful. I'm going to come, so Neil, then Scott, then Leah, if that's okay. So anything from you, Neil?
No, I'm good, thanks, Chair.
Okay, great. Scott.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm going to be a bit pet projector here as well, and look towards the flood sort of stuff. Sorry, I've just lost my flood alleviation for growth program. I'm just wondering how, if it has sight of the new funds that were sort of submitted in part of the budget process, which were the Innovative Flood Resilience Fund. And I just wondered whether the combined authority has the, I mean, Rosa might have been able to answer this if she was on the call, but I wonder if the combined authority has the ability to bid where other local authorities do, or whether there's a conflict arising. And also about how the adaptive pathways work, which is Yorkshire focused, is sort of factoring into that work as well.
I'm going to have to be honest here and probably say that I can probably get back to you and get colleagues to kind of comment. Unless Alan, I think maybe he's there doing something. He might be able to
have a go.
Go for it, Alan.
I can have a go. I don't know about the last bit. What I do know is that there is a 6-year, that DEFRA are reviewing the flooding programme for the next 6 years, and we are working with them and the Environment Agency on a pipeline of schemes. I reported this to the LEP board yesterday, so I might be able to remember the figures. I think we're asking government for about 100, just over 100 million for flood resilience programs, 5 million or 20 million, something like that, for natural flood management. It covers about 25 schemes protecting 5,000 jobs in the region, and we have had some conversations with the Environment Agency about it, because it's one of these things where it's co-developed with partners. So the Environment Agency, the Yorkshire, I'm trying to remember, it's the North and West Yorkshire Flood Resilience Forum, which brings together people from across North and West Yorkshire, because of course administrative boundaries less relevant for flooding. And so we have put that into government in draft and are awaiting some feedback on it. So the bit about the innovative piece, I'm not sure about. We'll need to get back to you on that one. But the general question of, are we trying to get government to commit funding for future flood resilience schemes? The answer is a very strong yes.
Okay. I just wondered if I could come back on that briefly and just sort of say it mentions there that some of the NFM projects are impacted by COVID, and I guess and that's true, I think, to an extent. But I just wanted to challenge part of that, in that there is still quite a bit of work going on in the NFM world, because it's sort of seen as almost one of the more sort of spheres of where you're able to still do a little bit of work. It's out in nature, you're able to sort of do a little bit of social distancing, tree planting and all that sort of stuff. So I guess that there is still work happening there. And although I agree entirely with the principle of that COVID has affected its sort of forward momentum, that there are people out there very much sort of still doing that at the moment, even with the sort of voluntary community sector as well, are quite engaged. Sorry, I'm not sure what my point is. That's sort of,
Look, don't worry, it's a really valid one, and certainly in my private capacity, I'm engaged in a number of initiatives that relate to exactly that agenda. And I do wonder whether perhaps for the next panel we could put a minor, not a substantive item, but a minor item linked to this, and invite contributions from Rosa if she's able to join us, and Neville from Yorkshire Water as well. I mean, those two organisations are clearly very actively involved in this space, and perhaps they might share with us what they're doing and how progress is being made. Would that be positive from your perspective, Scott, do you think? Yep.
Thank you. That's really great.
All right, let's do that, Jackie. And if it happens to coincide with the forest discussion as well, then that they could be linked perhaps. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to skip along here. So, Leah, you're muted.
I'll just unmute myself. Hello, sorry, and also apologies for only being able to join late. I had another meeting that was unfortunately overran. I had a question also about flooding, which was about how the plan works with highways policy to incorporate sort of flood resilience schemes within public realm, sort of sustainable drainage, things like that, within adopted streets, because actually that's somewhere that the public realm and the areas that are in control of the combined authority can be used to especially within towns and cities and in new development and in existing development. But actually there's often a problem with highways getting that adopted, or these new techniques are seen as sort of other. So it was just making sure that all major infrastructure investment is on the same page across the transport portfolios and with the green economy, and that we're getting consistent messages to officers on the ground about being able to adopt flood resilient infrastructure.
Yeah, and it's a really important point. It links back to what you were discussing earlier, Mark, I think, doesn't it, in terms of making sure that we've had an initial foray in terms of connectivity between this panel and the leadership that we're seeking to bring, and that which is being led through the transport panel. But we need multiple points of connection. I don't know, perhaps if you want to pick that up, Mark, or we just take that as an observation that can be dealt with later.
Well, simply that there is the next Transport Committee on Friday this week, which I'm attending. So if I had a sort of a short note that I could sort of raise in Transport Committee, we could make a very simple link this week.
Well, that sounds like a potential offline action between the two of you, if that's okay.
Great.
Oh, I do like those. That's excellent. That doesn't even make sense. Okay, so I'm going to come to Andrew, Councillor Waller, and then to you, Bill. William Firth after you. So Andrew, then Bill.
Thanks. I just flagged that there's a natural flood management scheme going through planning. The other councillor in the House is on another Zoom call, and fortunately the connection is still holding. So hopefully the Strensel flood lagoons will get through. I think the issue of green electricity is a pressing one, and York's been signed up since April to do that. But I think pressing through all of these is really the connection with skills and jobs. I think that's the crucial one to get across. And we're talking about pipeline. I can remember the Leeds City Region Homes and Community Agency DEEP bid for a 10-year programme to deal with the pre-1919 single brick terrace houses across the patch. So I think it's an important feature to make sure that there's consistent funding in enabling high levels of training and continued employment.
Thank you very much. That's great. Sorry, my screen's moved people around, which is slightly frustrating. But Bill, I know it's coming to you next, and I don't think I've left anybody else out apart from Richard Goodfellow. So I'm going to go from you, Bill, to Richard, if that's okay.
Yeah, Simon, just wanted to make a point. I was on the Rebiz call last week. So we discussed there a lot about the restriction on the spend currently and how we can look to get back on track in terms of forecast. And there's lots of work being done on engagement and awareness, which echoes with a lot of the sentiments expressed on the call today. So there's an active marketing campaign that's going to be launched, and that will be collaborative with lots of business ventures. So just wanted to feed that back in, and hopefully we can get that back into a green as opposed to an amber.
Super. Thanks, Bill. Richard, anything from you?
No.
Super. Okay, right. So we do have some AOB, but it's a relatively limited amount. So there's a quick question, I think possibly to you, Alan, if that's okay, just for a little bit of state of the nation update. In Ray, the airport expansion and where things stand and what timeline we're expecting. That's a question that's come in from Ben. And I know also that, Jackie, we wanted just to share a minor update, didn't we, around, you know what, I can't even remember what it is anymore. I've been on Zoom for 11 hours. It's around carbon innovation. You do it, I'll hand it to you. So what's the, Alan, what's the update on the airport expansion? And then I'm going to come across to Jackie in terms of the carbon innovation side of things.
I think that the planning application decision got delayed in Leeds City Council and hasn't been made yet. And the position of the combined authority hasn't changed from what it was in the summer.
Okay, Neil.
So I'm not. It's a bit of a political question, and one that I'm therefore going to struggle to answer with any more detail than that.
And we all know it's live as well. It was there in the chat, so I felt I ought to ask it.
No, it's fine.
It's an entirely appropriate response as well. Neil, I can see you. Is this relevant to the airport one, or is it?
It is. I'm well. Earlier this week, I was hot from our regular plans chairs meeting in Leeds councillors. So we're looking for the airport. I sit on the city plans panel, so I'm not going to comment on the application in itself, as you might imagine. But we're looking at a January meeting for a determination. All being well, subject to the chief plan officer and the chair of the panel being satisfied that everything's shipshape in Bristol fashion in terms of information analysis, reports, etc., etc. So January, yeah.
That's really helpful. Thank you. And thank you also, Alan. I fully understand that you can't respond directly on that given where things sit. So that's appropriate. Right. So the sort of preloaded AOB was with you, Jackie. So I'm going to come across to you and then we will conclude matters after you've shared your AOB.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So yeah, really quickly, you'll have seen in the item that we're discussing at the end of the report, there is reference to our internal corporate programme of work that we as the Command Authority are doing around tackling climate change internally as an organisation. As part of that, we've provided you with some updates in the last couple of papers on a really significant piece of work, which is around how we strengthen our decision making around carbon. To date, we've had some consultants working with us to review kind of best practice in the space, both nationally, internationally, and we are now getting to the point where we have some recommendations. We have set up a steering group, but we'd really like to maybe offer to the Green Economy panel an opportunity for a member or more than one member, if you are so inclined, to sit on that. It's kind of for a limited amount of time. So the work is just starting to gear up now. We'll get some recommendations in terms of what the different types of assessments that we will need at various different points in our decision-making processes. Some will be qualitative, some will be quantitative. But it's a really exciting time to kind of get involved to help shape that going forward. We'll probably be going to the combined authority in around February. So there's a great kind of opportunity to help really shape. After that, we will also be looking at testing it with some on our capital programs, and then more importantly, how we then share this toolkit or whatever it ends up being, the methodologies and the assessments, with all of our local authorities, so that they can, if they choose, they can also adopt similar methodologies, but also they are our key people that apply for funding. So in the future, they will need to use these assessments. So there's a huge amount of training, awareness, carbon literacy, all of those really exciting behaviour change things that we also need to do. So it's an open invitation for anybody that would like to get a little bit more involved. I think it'll probably be till summertime of next year, so it's not a huge commitment, long-term commitment, more of a short-term commitment.
That's great. Thank you, Jackie. And I think people can respond to you, can't they, directly offline on that one. So that's really super.
And Chair, sorry, one final thing. Could I just kind of go back to a few of the comments from various people around, particularly I think it was Leah, on the kind of the SUDs and the work that we're doing to kind of, I suppose, embed resilience into kind of key planning, capital programs, those kind of things. So there is a number of things that we've been doing. We can maybe bring back a paper on some of those, but we can also circulate some things immediately. So we do have a sustainable urban drainage SPD. So again, that's been adopted by some of the local authorities to really kind of embed some of that flood resilience into decisions, into key infrastructure projects. There is also the local plan work. So again, we've done significant work with our planners, and again, we can kind of give you a summary in terms of what we're doing with heads of planning in particular around some of these issues. And also we have an urban design guide that also picks up some of these issues. So there's quite a lot in that space I just want to mention, but we'll put some links and follow up if needs be afterwards.
That's great. Really, thanks for skipping that. That's really, really helpful. Okay, super. Right, so we have slightly run over 7 minutes. But not too bad. We have a lot to go through, and thank you very, very much indeed for all of your contributions, and particularly thanks to those who've led the discussions on those two substantive papers. I'm going to close the meeting now, and Jeanette, if you can maybe just knock it off from live streaming, that'd be great. But we'll maybe just leave the discussion open, because this is Jackie's final meeting, and normally we would be